morning of June 30th, 1908, something exploded in the sky. Not a small explosion, not even a large one. This blast was so powerful that it flattened nearly 80 million trees across a remote forest in Siberia. The shockwave was felt hundreds of miles away. Windows shattered in distant villages. People were knocked off their feet, and witnesses described something terrifying, a giant fireball, blazing across the sky. Moments later, the world seemed to explode. But here's the strangest part. When scientists finally arrived at the site, they found no crater, no massive meteor, no obvious explanation. Even today, more than a century later, the Tunguska event remains one of the most mysterious explosions in human history. What actually happened that morning? Was it a meteor, a comet, a secret experiment, or something far more mysterious? To understand this strange story, we have to travel back to the wild forests of Siberia in the early 20th century. In 1908, Siberia was one of the most remote places on Earth. Endless forests stretched across thousands of miles. Few roads existed. Small villages were scattered across the wilderness. Most of the people living there were hunters, traders, or indigenous groups who had lived in the region for generations. Life was simple and quiet. On the morning of June 30th, everything seemed normal. The sun had just begun rising over the forest. Birds filled the sky. Animals moved quietly through the trees. Then suddenly, something appeared in the sky. Witnesses described seeing a glowing object moving across the horizon. It was bright, unnaturally bright. Some people said it looked like a second sun. Others said it was a ball of fire tearing through the sky. One witness later described the moment like this. The sky split in two, and fire appeared high above the forest. As the object raced across the sky, it left behind a glowing trail. Animals began running. People froze in fear. Some thought the world was ending. Then, the explosion came. The explosion was enormous. The ground shook violently. Windows shattered in towns hundreds of miles away. People were thrown off their feet by the shockwave. One witness said the heat from the explosion felt like standing near a giant furnace. Moments later, a massive shockwave raced through the forest. Trees snapped like matchsticks. Entire sections of forest were flattened. Across more than 2,000 square kilometers, millions of trees fell to the ground. But strangely, many of them were lying in the same direction, as if a giant force had pushed them outward from a single point in the sky. Something had exploded above the forest. But what? Despite the massive explosion, no one actually saw the object hit the ground, and there was a simple reason for that. The region where the explosion occurred was almost completely uninhabited. Deep within the forests of Siberia, there were no cities, no large towns, and almost no observers. For days, strange lights appeared in the sky across Europe and Asia. People in London reported glowing night skies. Scientists detected unusual atmospheric disturbances. But no one yet understood what had happened. The world had witnessed something extraordinary. Yet the mystery had only just begun. You might expect that scientists would rush immediately to investigate such a massive explosion, but in 1908, that was almost impossible. The explosion occurred in one of the most remote regions on Earth. Reaching the site required traveling through miles of wilderness with almost no roads, and at the time, Russia was facing political turmoil and economic challenges. As a result, years passed before a serious scientific investigation began. It wasn't until 1927 that a Russian scientist named Leonid Kulik finally organized an expedition to the site. Nearly 20 years had passed since the explosion. What Kulik discovered shocked the scientific world. When Leonid Kulik and his team finally reached the explosion site, they expected to find a massive crater. After all, if a giant meteor had struck Earth, it should have left a huge impact hole. But instead, they found something very different. Miles and miles of fallen trees. The forest looked as if a giant hand had swept across the land. Trees lay flattened in every direction. Yet near the center of the explosion, something strange appeared. Some trees were still standing, but they had been completely stripped of their branches. Their bark had been burned away. They looked like tall, blackened poles rising from the earth. This pattern told scientists something surprising. Whatever exploded over the forest never actually hit the ground. The blast had happened in the air. Scientists began studying the destruction carefully. By analyzing the pattern of fallen trees, they estimated the strength of the explosion. The results were shocking. The energy released during the Tunguska event was likely between 10 and 15 megatons of TNT. To understand how powerful that is, the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima in 1945 released about 15 kilotons of energy. The Tunguska explosion was hundreds of times more powerful. If the explosion had occurred above a major city, the destruction would have been catastrophic. An entire city could have been wiped out instantly. Fortunately, the explosion occurred in one of the most isolated regions on Earth. But the mystery remained. What could create such a massive explosion without leaving a crater? As scientists studied the event, many theories began to appear. Some believed the explosion was caused by a meteor exploding in the atmosphere. Others suggested it might have been a comet made mostly of ice. There were even stranger ideas. Some people believed the explosion was caused by a tiny black hole passing through Earth. Others suggested it might have been an alien spacecraft accident. While many of these ideas sounded like science fiction, the lack of clear evidence made the mystery even deeper. Even today, scientists continue debating the true cause of the explosion, and the answer may still be hidden somewhere in the forests of Siberia. Despite decades of research, the Tunguska event remains one of the strangest events ever recorded. No impact crater, no large meteor fragments, just millions of fallen trees, and a massive explosion that came from the sky. More than a century later, scientists are still searching for answers. But the most fascinating part of the story is yet to come. Because new discoveries, modern technology, and shocking theories may finally reveal what really happened on that mysterious morning in 1908. By the early 20th century, the Tunguska event had already become one of the strangest mysteries in modern history. An explosion powerful enough to flatten millions of trees. Yet no crater, no clear impact site, no obvious meteor fragments. For scientists, this was deeply puzzling, and for decades, researchers continued returning to the remote forests of Siberia, hoping to finally uncover the truth. But every new expedition only added more questions. The most widely accepted explanation today is that the explosion was caused by a large space rock entering Earth's atmosphere. Scientists believe a meteor roughly 50 to 60 meters wide entered the atmosphere at extremely high speed. Traveling faster than 15 kilometers per second, the object began heating rapidly as it pushed through the air. The intense pressure and heat eventually caused the object to explode in the sky. This type of explosion is known as an airburst. Instead of hitting the ground, the meteor explodes in the atmosphere, releasing an enormous amount of energy. That energy spreads outward in a massive shockwave, which explains why millions of trees were knocked down in every direction. This theory matches many of the observations recorded during the Tunguska event. But it still left some unanswered questions, because even when meteors explode in the air, they usually leave fragments behind. Yet in Tunguska, scientists found almost nothing. Because of this strange lack of debris, some scientists proposed another explanation. Instead of a rocky meteor, the object may have been a comet. Comets are very different from meteors. While meteors are made mostly of rock and metal, comets are often described as dirty snowballs. They are made mostly of ice, dust, and frozen gases. If a comet entered Earth's atmosphere, the intense heat could cause it to vaporize completely before reaching the ground. That would explain why no large fragments were discovered. Some researchers believe the object that exploded over Siberia may have been a small comet. When it exploded high above the forest, it released enormous energy, but left very little physical evidence behind. For many years, this theory seemed very convincing, but the mystery still wasn't completely solved. During later expeditions, scientists discovered something interesting. Tiny particles of nickel and iron were found embedded in tree resin and soil samples from the Tunguska region. These elements are often found in meteors, which suggested that the explosion might indeed have been caused by a rocky asteroid rather than a comet. At the same time, researchers also discovered microscopic silicate particles that likely came from a space object that had completely disintegrated. These discoveries strengthened the idea that the object exploded before reaching the ground. In other words, the sky itself became the explosion point. Today, many scientists believe the most likely explanation is an asteroid airburst. In this scenario, a large asteroid entered Earth's atmosphere over Siberia in 1908. As the asteroid plunged toward Earth, Pressure built up rapidly around it. Eventually, the stress became too great. The asteroid shattered violently in midair. The explosion released energy equal to 10 to 15 megatons of TNT. That energy produced a massive fireball and an intense shockwave. The shockwave flattened more than 80 million trees across the forest. This theory explains many of the strange details recorded during the Tunguska event. But even today, scientists continue studying the event because it reveals something important about our planet. Events like Tunguska are extremely rare, but they are not impossible. Every day, thousands of small space rocks enter Earth's atmosphere. Most burn up harmlessly, but occasionally, larger objects arrive. If a large asteroid were to explode above a modern city, the results could be devastating. The Tunguska explosion occurred in one of the most remote regions on Earth. But if the same explosion had happened above cities like London, New York City, or Tokyo, millions of people could have been affected. Because of events like Tunguska, scientists around the world now actively monitor objects in space. Organizations such as NASA constantly track near-Earth asteroids that might pose a potential risk. In fact, entire programs now exist to detect dangerous objects long before they reach Earth. More than a century after Tunguska, a smaller but similar event occurred. In 2013, a meteor exploded over the Russian city of Chelyabinsk. The event became known as the Chelyabinsk meteor. The explosion was much smaller than Tunguska, but still powerful enough to shatter thousands of windows and injure more than 1,000 people. Security cameras across the city captured the moment the meteor streaked across the sky. For scientists, the Chelyabinsk explosion provided valuable insight into how asteroid airbursts behave, and it helped confirm that events like Tunguska are very real threats. Even after more than a century, the Tunguska event continues to capture the imagination of scientists and historians. Part of the reason is the sheer scale of the explosion. Another reason is the mystery that surrounded it for so long. For decades, people proposed extraordinary explanations: alien spacecraft crashes, secret weapons experiments, even strange cosmic phenomena. While modern science has provided strong evidence for the asteroid airburst theory, the story of Tunguska still feels almost unbelievable. A massive explosion from the sky, in one of the most remote forests on Earth. An event so powerful, it reshaped thousands of square kilometers of land. Yet it left almost no obvious trace. The story of Tunguska reminds us of something important. Earth is not isolated from the universe. Our planet moves through a cosmic environment filled with asteroids, comets, and space debris. Most of the time, these objects pass safely by, but occasionally, one enters our atmosphere. On June 30th, 1908, the skies above Siberia exploded with unimaginable power. Millions of trees fell, the ground shook, and witnesses watched in horror as a blazing fireball tore through the sky. More than a century later, scientists are still learning from that event. Because the Tunguska event was not just a mysterious explosion, it was a warning from the universe itself, a reminder that even in the quiet forests of Siberia, the sky can still surprise us.